Let's start at the very, very beginning. Once upon a time, there was a pretty little girl named Maritza who grew up where?
Upper West Side.
Okay. Upper West Side of Manhattan, yeah?
Yes.
And so tell us about your upbringing, your family, your siblings, your just the experience.
I think it was the typical Latino family, lots of people in the household, lots of extended family. At the time, there were lots of Latinos on the Upper West Side, where I live in the Lincoln Center area right now, which is, the neighborhood's changed a lot, so there's not as many Latinos as there were way back. It was pretty standard. You know, we watched telenovelas together. We ate a lot of food, a lot of plátanos, morning, lunch, dinner. You can relate. Y'all can relate. I know you can.
They can relate. So growing up, you know, you're in the Upper West Side. Right?
Yes.
You're thinking, you know, this is New York. It's a big city. I have a great family. What are your dreams? What's going through your head as a little girl? Let's say 10 years old, 12 years old. What are your plans?
I was fascinated with Curious George.
With Curious George.
Yeah. Because Curious George was always kind of like exploring and getting into trouble, but not like serious trouble. Like, it was never like Curious George goes to jail. Like, he goes to the park, and then he discovers all this stuff. And I was really fascinated with that.
And how did you want to apply the Curious George thing to you?
By learning.
Did you want it to be curious?
So I had this very odd combination of fascination with Curious George, and then we had a world atlas, just one world atlas. I don't know who bought it into the house. No one bought in another one. So it was always like, when I learned how to read, it was this one book about the world, and then Curious George stories.
You're the first and only person that's ever used Curious George as a reference point from their childhood.
He's iconic. Come on, he was
he is
always
iconic.
like doing something. Like, you know, he was here, he was there, he was in the park, he was, you know, in the jungle.
I was more of a Dr. Seuss person though.
Dr. Seuss is a little too cerebral, too trippy for me. Yeah. George was simple.
I always felt like, you know, as a kid, it was kind of acid trippy without knowing what acid trippy was.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
So.
But Curious George is simple. Give him a banana, he's set to go. Healthy snacks.
Okay.
It was great.
So then what starts to shape your dreams and ambitions at that age?
Well, actually, there was a big fire in the neighborhood. So that was a turning point. There was a big fire. The building was engulfed in flames. It was multiple alarms. And it was kind of like being able to see that from the window, and then later on in the evening seeing that wind up on the news. So sort of being witness to that story and sort of seeing a little bit of how it ends up on the news was something that really, like, I think that was a very definitive moment.
Did you process it in terms of, this is something I want to do? Or did it pretty much pique your curiosity, like, what is that world and what is happening there and how do I become part of that?
I think it was actually all of that, plus really just the curiosity of just wanting to have access to information. So sort of seeing how that fire developed, and seeing later on in the evening, just watching the whole news coverage of that, and seeing how the reporter had information, obviously, that I didn't have because I was a little kid watching this from my window. So it was sort of like bridging that gap of what I saw versus what was actually being shown in the newscast.